typically when we think about Valentine's Day, it's this romantic eros love, right? What would you comment, what would you say to our listeners about the movement in your own heart, our hearts, as we go on this journey from one to the other? And I mean agape.
With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoweh's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful ends for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more.
Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. Michael Thompson hanging out with S.J. Jennings. And we are taking a very courageous step.
Risk.
Very bold, very bold move on the two of us and all of our experience to step into, this is our Valentine's Day podcast. So I guess that would make it some level of a special edition.
Holiday edition.
We brought our King-Mies because there is a chapter 15 in here about the Queen, and we're going to kind of be bringing that into play. And our producer guy, Caleb Richwine, has sent out a questionnaire of some kind. I think he put it out on social media.
Yeah. He just put it out like, hey, we're going to do a Valentine's episode. Yeah. What are your questions about marriage and relationships?
So you have the, I can't even say experts. I can't even say it.
Please don't.
So we'll this could be really short. This might be our shortest podcast ever. But unless we go from marriage advice to don't do the list of don'ts. And
that I'm pretty well versed
in. What we've done. So learn. That's how wisdom's earned.
Painfully.
Yeah. Don't do that. Exactly. Anymore, ever. So
all right. Before we get into that, though, we have something else that we want them to listen to, right?
Yep. Yeah. Yep. So before we go on, here's a short message that we want you to hear. It is important to be able to talk about our marriage, and the Rendezvous Project facilitates that. How many of us really take time to talk about our marriages? Yeah. We talk about our kids, we talk about work, we talk about finances, we talk about so many things, but to have a conversation or several about how I feel, what I'm thinking, where I'm at in our marriage. Right. I think the Rendezvous Project is very helpful for that.
Yeah. We're given prompts to be able to answer certain questions and to explore certain things more deeply that we wouldn't normally just do at the table.
Without the prompts.
Without the prompts. Right. Yeah. It can be a little disruptive. It can be fun. It can just stir things and invite things in a way that
I get it, because what you're saying is
really good.
If you ask me that question, there it might be a little bit much. But to have something else facilitate those questions, and you get to go to those as a team, you get to share those, answering the questions of the Rendezvous Project. I think that's very helpful.
Yeah.
Discover more at therendezvousproject.com.
Welcome back to the Exploring More podcast. And just as an editor's note, we are dropping this in between our series, part 1 and part 2, on getting your heart back. So the Valentine's special is interrupting the regularly scheduled program of getting your heart back. So
maybe this could be prep work for your Valentine's date night.
Yeah.
If you're going out on a date.
Yeah.
And if you're married or involved with a significant other, you should probably think about going out on a date on Valentine's Day. I wouldn't let it just slide by without any recognition. That's one of those harder lessons.
Which is really funny that you say that, because now I'm like, wait, when is Valentine's Day this year? Is it on a Wednesday?
I think it's a Wednesday.
Is it Wednesday?
It's a Wednesday.
It is a Wednesday. So
which can be a tough night.
Where's my phone? I gotta make myself
Set a reminder
for the 10th, 8th.
Yeah.
Have you ever been the guy that stepped in for a card and it's like the 14th, and so it's all picked over and crazy?
Man, absolutely.
Yeah, I've been that guy.
It looks like a ticker tape parade in there because guys are in there last minute
Don't be
trying
that
to find
guy.
a card. You can write a letter.
There we go. Don't be that guy. Don't do that.
That's
do
the
this.
subtitle for this message. Don't be that guy.
Don't be that guy. So,
well, let me give the background. Why is Valentine's Day even a thing?
Yeah,
because I just looked it up on Google, so this must be accurate, right?
Okay.
But yes, St. Valentine's Day, Feast of St. Valentine, celebrated annually on February 14th. It originated as a Christian feast day honoring a martyr named Valentine, and through later folk traditions has become a significant cultural, religious, and commercial celebration of romance and love in many regions of the world. So there you go.
So he's the one.
That's why it's a thing.
He's the one to blame.
Yeah.
Or I've always thought Hallmark was maybe the one to blame for the.
I thought that too.
Pressure that can often come with Valentine's Day,
greeting card day,
and kind of making light of it, and yet, we're talking about relationships and a day that really seems to be committed to honoring, even promoting this thing that we call love.
Mm-hmm.
It's the National Day of Love, I guess,
in
relationships. So back to the where would you like to start? Because we have some of the questions.
Okay. Well, I don't want to talk about any of that yet because what you just said, the National Day of Love, we know there's 3 types of love, right? Eros, agape, and what's the third one? I can't remember.
Koinonia.
Yeah, koinonia. So typically when we think about Valentine's Day, it's this romantic eros love, right? What would you say to our listeners about the movement in your own heart, our hearts, as we go on this journey from one to the other? And I mean agape. We're trying to love wholeheartedly. Unconditionally, right? And we're trying to get more and more of our hearts back.
Yeah.
So you've told the story before. I've told stories before of kind of using love to get what we want. It's not what we want to do, right? We do not want to be that guy. So if there's something you would say before we get into the questions, in the next couple of minutes, the different types of love and what does it mean to love another, love a spouse with that deeper love, that wholeheartedness to you.
Yeah.
Bear with us too. I just completely sprung that on Michael. So.
Yeah. So I think my thoughts go to where they tend to go with a lot of our encouraging men and women, equipping men and women to love. And that is, you do your own work. You as much healing as you can possibly get. Go back in your story, recover from some things. If there's a standard of, what love is, as Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 13, then there's a lot of things love isn't. And yet I've found myself very capable of doing the things to and with Robin that are more self-centered. I remember years ago reading the 5 love languages.
Oh, yeah. Gary Chapman, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where my mind and heart were in some of that selfish self-centeredness, it was just more intel in, how to love Robin in the hopes of getting something in return. So,
wait a second.
Okay, I thought we were about to have to draw pistols. I didn't know what was happening there.
What's going on?
He was just telling a lovely story about the 5 love languages and how helpful that was.
How selfish they can be.
Yes.
Used for
for selfish purposes.
Yeah, ulterior motives. And so, doing your own. So, yeah. Did you let them know we were doing a Valentine?
Tell them we were doing this? Okay.
I saw the schedule.
You saw the schedule.
And thought, wait a second, how can you do this without us?
Yes, Valentine's typically involves
your significant
your
other.
spouse.
The fairer sex, yes.
Well, I think there's a fair amount of confession and
the subtitle for this episode is "Don't Be That Guy." So
don't be that guy that records a podcast without your bride.
Oh my gosh! Yes,
this is going to be a several-part series. Obviously,
Is there going to be a part 2 where we get to
maybe so?
our voices are
that could be interesting. Yeah, we'll ask our sponsors.
Yeah,
okay.
See how that works.
So we've got some questions
that better anyway.
I think you're probably right.
Yeah, that's true.
You're certainly easier to look at than we are.
So, yeah. Well, thanks for dropping in.
Yeah. It's great to see you guys.
We'll see you for part 2.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll talk about this later.
We were just talking about the different types of love.
Way to go,
agape
Caleb.
And eros and koinonia. Yes, we were.
All right.
I love you.
See ya.
I love you too.
Bye. I literally was about to come out of my chair. Man, that scared me. Okay.
So
I was so happy to see it was the two of them. And then I was
happy.
uncertain about I should be happy.
It's funny.
I felt caught. Like, I didn't do it.
Yeah. And I'm in the middle of a confession on the 5 love languages.
Right.
So let me just finish that thought. That
was funny.
I just think that you can use a lot of things to try to get
right,
for yourself, whatever your love language is.
Yeah.
I think that could be an expression even of your false self. Yeah, it's complicated, but words of affirmation. I mean, all the love languages we are built to give and receive. It's their love languages.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a theory I have of what might be someone's, major. I think that's kind of you read that so you can define or discern what your primary love language is.
Right.
I wonder how many of those primary love languages are based on woundedness and being missed. If you never got words of affirmation,
absolutely,
then it would make sense to me that your primary love language is your need is words of affirmation. And so back to this, receiving healing and entering into intimacy with God is your best move, is your best bet. How do you take that neediness and bring it to God, who has a capacity to love you in all those languages and many, many others? And then I can bring, you were talking about a wholeheartedness, a healed heart.
Mm-hmm.
Then I can bring that to my relationship with Robin, rather than trying to go to Robin to get those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And her vice versa. Here's my love languages. You need to do more of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I'll do that if you do this, and that's not helpful.
It's tricky.
Yeah.
It's tricky. Yeah. So it's a great question. But I think, so let me make sure I'm on record. I'm not against the love languages. I just am not confident that they don't also reveal a part of your heart that needs something, that if you're taking that to other people, eventually you'll exhaust them. Eventually, I want to be loved. I need to be loved this way.
Yeah.
So, and I know that's not the intent behind it, but I feel like there is an undercurrent in my experience.
It can be used that way.
It could be used that way.
For sure. And I go to, I remember we were doing a panel at the men's weekend and talking about loving a woman and relationships. And you said, I wonder how many of us, of the men who are in the audience who have been through a divorce, have divorced the false self of their wife, and their wife divorced the false self of the husband.
Yeah.
So when I think about the love languages, and Sherry and I utilized that tool, we took the assessment, all of that.
Yeah.
Well, that was 10 plus years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm way more healed and wholehearted than I ever was then. So it's not really, what if you take that assessment and it's your false self's love language?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think mostly that's kind of what happens.
Yeah.
If it's another tool to say, this is how I arrange for love, because that's what the false self does. Arranges for love.
Self-provision, self-protection,
Yes.
self. So
all of that.
I've got another, kind of a deeper shade of that in recent years, SJ, that I think is appropriate, that not only might you be divorcing that person's false self, which, that is a theory, but I do think too that if you're in conflict or you don't have the ability to be honest and truthful and forthcoming with your feelings, so you're hiding.
Yeah.
Now, even the idea that if I divorce you, I could actually, maybe I could get away from this false self in me.
Mm-hmm.
The person
that's triggered
the
by
person
you.
that I am
Yeah.
with you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to divorce you because you're the reason that I'm that way. No, you're the reason I'm unhappy. No,
you're the one that provokes that false
self. There's a lot more to it, and and one of my more favorite words recently, with things going on with my mom, and she's sick and has cancer, and we're kind of moving through those days, and it's complicated. It's complicated, the emotions and feelings that come up in any relationship.
Absolutely.
In any moment, and how, I don't want to learn to just live with it in a way that I swallow those things, what I'm feeling and thinking, but rather, how do I process those with God? What are they invitations to?
Right.
To even consider, maybe I don't have this right. Maybe I don't see this as well as I could, And when you look at 1 Corinthians 13, that we were talking about, what love is and what love does, then the training program is all kind of right there, and it's not for the faint of heart.
No.
It's to love a woman, to love anyone, is to step into such vulnerable and important spaces, and if God is love, then really you are in the sanctification training of becoming like Jesus, and being and learning and walking in some of the lessons that can really produce the character that your true self is made for.
Yeah.
And can offer from a good place.
I like what you said, that the vulnerable space. Like I'm not sure I'm ready to make this statement, but if your loved one doesn't, evoke some, or provoke, I should say, some vulnerability in you, feeling of vulnerability, then you may not be as open-hearted to them as you think you are. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. Letting them just see and experience the parts you really want them to. Because you're afraid.
And only want them to see.
Yeah,
right?
Because you're afraid if they saw something else. And maybe your experience has taught you that, either in earlier stages of your masculine journey or feminine journey, or just even inviting you to see something in this stage and phase, like I am with Robin now, 34 years this year. Yeah, we're in new places this year than we've ever been with our girls, with our stage of life, with health, with parents, and so you are going to walk through, a lot of things together. And so the training and the healing and the training are just something that I can actually do with God and bring to Robin. Back to that, I think that's where I'd want to really camp out on these thoughts about
the love languages or, any other tool or resource. I mean, I look at our Rendezvous project. I mean, that's a pretty deep dive.
Oh, yeah.
Into multiple the things that we're talking about. Is there if somebody said, "Well, is there a resource that does?" Well, Heart of Warrior Encounter coming up in April. That's if you want to
deepening weekend.
If you want to improve your marriage, send your husband or bro. You should come because healing in an area of your life, those that are under your charge or that have been entrusted to you, a spouse, your children, they're going to benefit from you getting more healed and more wholehearted to recover from some of the things that the enemy has set against you from a young age.
Yeah.
All of that. We talk about this all the time, but I think, how does this look in marriage and what does this, mean, for a Valentine's Day and the opportunity to enter into that? No, we've talked about this, and I think, man, one of the greatest things, back to that vulnerability, is to know her story. Oh, yeah. For her to know your story, what happened to you. I'm amazed at how many couples we've encountered that was a huge exercise for them. They learned things about each other, though they've been married 15, 20, 25, 40 years.
One couple, 50 years.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about Joe and Maureen. That's the couple in here, where, he thought he'd learned everything and knew everything there was about her, and come to find out by the end of the weekend, 3 days later, because of the invitation of knowing and being known, which is our definition for intimacy, knowing and being known, and some of the exercises that they got to do, that story ended with Joe saying, "I was wrong."
With tears.
Yeah. There's so much more to her, to us, to me. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so if you don't, we got to get to these questions, but if you don't exercise your will, like we talk about, you can go 50 years married to the same person and not know them.
That sounds really painful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe naive.
Yeah.
Oblivious, I think that word comes to mind. Okay. So that was a lot of ground clearing and really good. So. We can go down.
Let's just go down the list here, man. We got 5 really good ones that cover a lot of ground.
All right, you ask the question, I'll throw a thought, and then you throw a thought, and then we'll go on.
Okay. How will the enemy come for my marriage?
Through your false self.
Okay.
Next.
2.
No.
Are there?
I mean,
yes.
It's
so true, man.
I mean, the more you are false self-dominant and the wounds of your heart and past and the lies that you live under about yourself, that the enemy's just going to, like a puppeteer, marionette, they're just going to
absolutely
have way too much on you. That's why healing is a great forward step.
Healing from, undoing what the enemy's done through wounds and wounders that have generated and created the false self that you live under. And if this is your first time listening to the ExploringMore podcast, go back in our archives. We've got tons of episodes on the false self and all of that. But also, so undoing, vows and agreements in yourself that have created that false self, but also understanding that the false self in your spouse is going to summon your false self.
Huge. Yeah, we learned that and we've seen that, and so we do teach that false self summons false self. So
can.
And yet if there's I know we're not trying to talk in code, but at the same time, if I'm living and walking with God free, that's my true self that's doing that.
Yeah. Knows who you are,
orientation,
yeah.
Who I am, where I am, and the good God's up to in my life. Then, if Robin happens to be, in we'll say a false self moment, or I am, she has a chance of pulling me up and entering into that,
from her. Yes.
Even though my
sarcasm or anger or frustration or whatever I'm doing that's unloving, that's the false self has a ability to specialize in that. That's how the enemy's going to work. So, and in general, SJ, if this is an institution that God created, if this is an expression, a man and a woman walking with God together is an expression. That's the Trinity. That's the new Trinity. Him, her, and God. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But now that's a force to be reckoned with. That's how God rolled this thing out called marriage, Adam and Eve, and it really hasn't changed much. It's under attack. It's under assault. It's if the enemy came after the first couple, they know what they're doing, and I think that there's whispers that the enemy can use that one of the two will believe, and it's just going in the ditch after that.
Right.
So I think that's
the good thing. The good thing is, and it's kind of a trick question for first timers at the weekend. We put this chart up, right? And there's four possibilities in every interaction between two people.
Yeah.
True self on true self, true on false, false on true, false on false. And 3 of 4 of those are usually people say bad because they see the false self, and we're kind of trained that way. But the truth is, if Robin, not to pick on Robin, if Sherry is coming at me and provoking my false self somehow, I have the opportunity to respond because I'm oriented and working on becoming more wholehearted and more oriented. I have the opportunity to exercise my will and say, no, I don't have to respond that way in that moment. Now, sometimes he just busts out of the cage, the false self, this little monster, right? Sometimes,
if it's in the cage.
If it's in the cage at all.
If it has a cage.
Right. Right. Sometimes he just comes out, and it's okay as long as you are circling back and doing repair after that. But if one of us can exercise our will and bring our true self to that moment, we've got a chance.
Yeah. Yeah. If somebody's sober and can stay the designated driver, they can get you home. And so, I think it's such a great question, and it's complicated. It's expansive. I mean, there's so much that the enemy does want to do, and has had a part in when these two people come down the aisle. Well, the enemy's already been working in the first 20, 25, 28.
However old they are.
Yeah, I mean, so there's something already there. That's why we say you want to go, get your heart back. You want to go experience redemption and restoration with God, because that's what you can bring to your marriage. So that's a great way to combat what the enemy's going to want to do.
Yeah.
And now using you against one another when God wants to partner with each other to love. So
you said something, one more comment on this particular question. How will the enemy come from my marriage? You said something a minute ago, if the enemy went after the first couple, he's certainly going to go after the rest of us. And it just prompted a thought in my mind that, one of the tools that in my experience the enemy uses most frequently is isolation.
Yeah.
Making you think you're the only one, not every couple in history that goes back to Adam and Eve.
Yeah, you use
whether
the word,
you think that's a story or truth or whatever you think. But if we somehow get set up to believe that we're the only ones going through what we're going through, as individuals and as couples. And I think the enemy uses that.
Yeah, you used the word provoke a minute ago, which has an aggressive move to it. But, there's times that I can hide, or Robin can hide, like disengage, which is a passivity, which also can provoke things like, why won't you talk to me? Or, how come you always do that? The shutting down.
Yeah.
So, and those questions aren't bad questions, but usually in the heat of some emotional exchange, that's not well timed, because now you're just adding to why they don't want to talk to you because now you're angry. And so I think the complexity of warfare, particularly the enemy and what they are trying to do in a marriage is isolation, is divide, disunity, and even invite me to judge you, my spouse, and my spouse judge me, and just add to the, this hellish garden that they are tending to.
Yeah, more stuff in the
thorns and weeds and all that kind of crap. So, all right, let's keep going. We want to hit a couple more. Are there situations that are impossible to forgive?
That's a difficult question.
It's a great question, difficult question. Where I go with that is it depends on, I think our whole definition of forgiveness is here. And I'm not going to go into chapter 17, but I waited to chapter 17 to write about forgiveness in King Me because that the title of chapter 17 is Kings at War. So forgiveness. And we were just talking about this the other day on the porch, our Wednesday afternoons where we just circle up and talk about stuff. It's the one thing that God seems to give I'm talking about marriage now, in the spaces of adultery and affairs. It's the one trump card. But he doesn't say you don't have to forgive them. He says there's merit to not staying with them, right?
Yeah, you don't have to stay in an abusive situation.
So when trust is broken like that, that's still not implying that you don't want to move in and towards forgiveness. But like we've said, this is not the kind of forgiveness that when you're kids, he bonked you or you bonked her, or he took my cookie. Hey, you shouldn't hit him, so you say you're sorry, and then you say you're sorry. That's not what we're talking about. This is deep, deep water when it comes to forgiving betrayal, forgiving. Yeah, what the question implies is are there situations where it's impossible? So I believe that for all I've done, that he could forgive me, that God would forgive me. I don't think that there's anything that should be impossible to be forgiven. And I don't think you have to do that alone. And it doesn't mean reconciliation.
Yeah, it doesn't mean staying in a difficult or abusive situation. Yeah. You want to be clear about that.
But I do think there is some pretty strong scripture to support the pain of unforgiveness.
Yeah.
And when you've been wronged, that I think that's a warfare, special force trump card that I think Jesus and you get to explore, get to walk together through. Yeah. And it might feel like a valley of death, but you're not saying that what they did is okay. What you're saying, in my definition of forgiveness, what I've come to understand is what you are saying is, I'm not going to require payment. Even and I'm sorry, I'm not. I've got to
take myself off the judgment seat.
I've got a few people on my list that I'm in the process of forgiving.
Yep.
Right? Being mindful that it might take 70 times 7 in order to accomplish.
Yeah.
And I think Jesus was speaking more to that, the times it might take versus some fell swoop. So
there's a book and a movie, The Shack, that is all about that.
Yeah.
And I think we ought to do an episode or two on forgiveness. What it is, what it isn't. Yeah. We just touched on it.
Yeah.
But to go a little deeper into it.
I've been listening to on YouTube. John Ortberg has a little show it's called Becoming Myself, and he has a series on forgiveness I thought was brilliant. And so I would recommend that to any of our friends. But talking about it is a good thing. And it's a very difficult thing to do. And I think that's why you don't have to do it by yourself.
Absolutely.
You got to be careful, very, very careful.
I think it's
Great
really
question.
important to talk about at some point, and maybe Ortberg does, what it is and what it isn't.
Yeah.
Because I think people can get into the idea that if I forgive them, I'm saying what they did is okay and all of that,
Yeah, Caleb, I'm looking at these going, all right, we could do a show on all of these. But let me move on. How can I avoid attacking my spouse instead of attacking the problem? Well, just don't do that.
Yeah, quit doing that.
Next one.
No, actually, you can go back to question number 1 because they're kind of
the
similar.
enemy is related to that, absolutely connected in that.
And avoid attacking your spouse by not operating out of your false self, because only your false self is going to attack.
Yeah.
Let me say that again. Only your false self is going to attack your spouse. Your true self would not do that.
How can I avoid attacking my spouse? I mean, that there's so much in there about what that's provoking in you and how much you hold before you explode. How many infractions. Everybody has their limit. Some people are just kind of quickly going to fly. They're going to exchange punch for punch, but others, when you feel that kind of anger, frustration, how can I avoid attacking my spouse instead of the problem? Kindly, patiently, slowly.
Yeah. I think of one time in our history where I made a mistake on our taxes, and I fully was anticipating, that Sherry would come after me rather than the problem as the person that asked this question, how do I not say, why'd you do that? Or what were you thinking? Or how could you miss that? Or rather than saying, okay, what do we need to do?
Yeah.
Right. And working together on that. And again, all of these, it feels like they're all tied together, because the first example I just gave you was a false self response.
Yeah.
The second one was, okay, we're in this together. We're a partnership. I've made mistakes before.
Yeah.
So can I give you enough grace in the moment to say it's okay? It was a mistake.
Right.
Let's figure this out.
Yeah. We were talking the other day about this, where there's just some things that you get to try on and try to do differently in many ways for the first time. So, how can I avoid attacking my spouse instead of attacking the problem? An awareness of that, a consciousness of that is a great place to start. The question's a great question. And yet when we're talking about it in the locker room, it's very different than talking about it in the battle that comes up. And, I think you want to practice small. I think of the Patriot, aim small. Practice small.
Aim small, miss small.
Yeah. I mean, is it spilt milk? Is it dishes in the what is it?
Yeah. Is it
because taxes feel a little bit, and yet so many of the problems, I'm not sure so many of the problems have a person connected to them. So that's the beauty of the question. How do I avoid, if they're so pre-wired to be attacked, and feel attacked rather than even with a kind approach. Hey,
could provoke that.
Can we talk about could we talk about the bathroom for a minute and these things, and when it's like this, and I mean, you can lay a lot of pillows. It doesn't mean there's not going to be a concussion.
Right.
So I think that's just and to step into those conversations. Hopefully they'll end better than they got started. But the last one, where can I find good role models of love and leadership for my marriage? This is going to be a commercial for the Rendezvous Project. I don't think the couples that we were perfect marriages. I think we teach and speak in the Rendezvous Project for marriage from places of learning and walking with Jesus in the very ways that we've been talking about for all these other questions. And so, to try to fit it all, right, Caleb, to fit it all in 45, whatever we are, 50 minutes now, and in overtime just to address these things. And we take, 8 hours? 9-ish hours?
13 sessions.
13 sessions. And time alone with God, how much answer do you want?
Right.
You know, how much encouragement, how much direction, how much training do you want? We could try to give you some opinions of, but like the false self, true self, that's a 10-minute, that to have that explained in the context of two realms, two kingdoms, and the enemy, all of that stuff. I just would say, you know, the Rendezvous Project is my answer to where can I find good role models of love and leadership for my marriage. I think I would also say that in Heart of a Warrior, chapter 13 is loving a woman. Jump there. You know, if you're a man who has that book and you want to ask your wife, hey, these knuckleheads on this podcast said that it might be a good idea if I invited you to read this chapter and tell me what you think. Mm-hmm. You know, hopefully you won't need helmets and flak jackets to do that, but to you know, and then chapter 15 is the queen. I mean, that's another, to see what she thinks and feels.
In King Me, yeah.
In King Me, yeah. Mm-hmm. So I would, to know what she thinks and feels about something without even arguing with her, to try to tell her what to think and feel and believe, that's kind of ground zero.
Yeah.
Do you know what she thinks and feels and why she believes some of the things that she does? And again, as a man, we all probably went into marriage in some ways, you know, thinking we could fix, maybe overlook, you know, things. And
never even entered my mind, bro.
Okay.
I was 20.
Yeah.
So
bliss, naivety, ignorance. So that didn't happen to you. That didn't happen to you until you were 27
exactly.
in your marriage. 7
when
years later,
when my brain was fully connected, then, you know,
right.
7
but
years later.
I think that you know, that we just don't even realize some of the things we're carrying into marriage.
Doubt.
And that's the point.
We're dragging a U-Haul, each one of us.
Yeah. And some of that stuff in the U-Haul is pretty toxic.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah. So those are my short and somewhat futile answers to some pretty good questions, actually.
Really great questions.
Yeah, I think that you know, we've got a men's conference coming up in April. That'd be my last plug for. Yeah, we do those events so that a man can begin to recover, be restored, walk with God in some new and significant ways, and they get to take that home.
One of my favorite things that we say on Sunday morning is like, okay, you know, it's Sunday, we've been here since Thursday, and we're not going to charge you an extra cent for the parenting, for the marriage, relationship seminars that you've had all weekend, that have taken place.
Weekend,
you thought we were just talking about you and your heart and being a man, and what does it mean to be a beloved son. But really, what we were trying to teach you as well was a little bit of Miyagi, right? Sand the floor and
the supplies.
Yeah, paint the fence.
Yeah.
So to realize that, you know, even though you're getting your heart back, you're working on your intimacy with God.
Yeah.
That is the key to the rest of your relationship.
Yeah. So to wrap it up, hey, if this wasn't helpful, let us know and send us an email. If this was encouraging, then send Caleb an email and say, way to go, Caleb.
Wait, I think that was vice versa.
No, I said it on purpose. I said it that way on purpose. If we weren't helpful, let us know. We can take
ExploringMore at Zoweh.org. If you got more questions, you know, we'll try to address them offline. But because
go to the Zoweh website, Zoweh.org, and hit the events if you want to know more information about the Heart of Warrior Encounter that's coming up in April.
April 25th.
Rendezvous Project, that series, that video series, everything is there for you just to check out with that and get started in that space. So with that, let me say, on behalf of the Exploring More podcast team, I hope you have a good Valentine's Day. And for those of you who this is really a hard day, we are sorry.
Plenty of folks out there.
There's lots of reasons why that might be, and I'm hopeful that you could bring that hurting heart to God, to the Trinity, and they would do a number on your heart that invites you to see how loved you really are. And so that's my prayer for all of us this Valentine's Day. And God bless. We'll see you next time on the Exploring More podcast.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoweh.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoweh on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoweh on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.